Week number 12 of the NFL season is officially in the books, so in today's video, let's go ahead and talk about every single game of week number 12. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. Let's just hop right into it though. And we are going to begin with our Thursday night football matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. This was definitely a very disappointing performance from the Steelers team, but I'm not necessarily too worried about them. It's just one of those things. For whatever reason, Mike Tomlin just likes to lose to bad teams occasionally, and this is just kind of one of those games. It also doesn't help that it was snowing in like the entire second half of the game, so you really couldn't control those type of temperatures and those sort of obstacles to overcome. So again, I'm not too worried about the Steelers team. But for the Cleveland Browns, I know you probably wanted to lose this game, but it was a fun game. It was a fun moment to see Jameis Winston actually going out there and make some big time plays, and it has to feel good that your team is still actively trying to win games. I don't think this changes my perspective of either one of these teams all that much. Maybe it makes me a little bit more cautious about predicting highly for the Steelers team, but I still feel like they're a really good team. And for Cleveland, I feel like they're a better team than where they were with Deshaun Watson, but they're still not a very good team. That being said, I love Jameis Winston, so I'm excited to see what this Browns team could do moving forward with him as a starter. Then we go ahead and move over to our Sunday 12 o'clock games, beginning with the upset of maybe the biggest upset of the week between the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans. The Titans won this game 32-27, and I don't think many of us thought that was going to happen. Tennessee, the past couple weeks, has played better football with Will Levis, but they were still losing games pretty handedly. And in this one, Will Levis made a couple really nice plays while also making his occasional boneheaded plays. For example, that one interception where he had to put his head down to try to make a play but didn't make a play was a really bad interception, but he also made a couple big-time splash plays. It's kind of the ups and downs of Will Levis. That being said, in this game, I kind of felt like Will Levis outplayed CJ Stroud, which kind of makes us have to have a bit of a conversation regarding CJ. In this game, the run game was basically non-existent. Joe Mixon only had 22 yards on 14 carries, so the bulk load of work was on CJ Stroud's back, and he wasn't able to perform at a high enough level. On the day, he was 20 for 33 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks, and he's kind of having a tad bit of some regression from last year. Do I think he's a bad quarterback? No, far from it. I think he's still a really good quarterback, but it's definitely showing that he is a flawed quarterback that still has some stuff to improve upon. I'm not too worried about his future and maybe even this Texans future, but given the fact that we thought he could be a potential MVP and the Texans could be potential Super Bowl contenders, this is a bit of a disappointing trend. The Texans are now 7-5, and I think they're still going to make the playoffs and potentially win the division, but I am a little bit more cautious about predicting this team to be genuine contenders, and I've kind of felt that way the past couple weeks. Then we move on to what was a crazy finish between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. It felt like Minnesota had this game won very late into the game. They had a sizable lead, and then all of a sudden Chicago makes a couple big plays, gets an onside kick to go their way, and next thing you know, they're actually tying the game up and going into overtime. And if you're a Vikings fan, that's got to be really frustrating because you felt like you had the game won. Then you get to overtime and, anyone can win that game at that moment. Ultimately, Minnesota did find a way to win this one. Sam Darnold continues to play better football from what he did a couple weeks ago. On the day, 22 for 34 for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, a very precise day. Also made a couple of just brilliant throws. That was a really solid performance from Sam Darnold, and also Aaron Jones also got going on this one. 22 carries for over 100 yards and a touchdown. For the Minnesota Vikings, this is a quality win. Definitely not their best performance of the season, but, you just want to continue to win games, and they did so in this one. For the Chicago Bears side of things, it's just been a really frustrating sort of second half of the season so far. They haven't won a game in quite some time, even though they arguably could have won a lot of these games. Their offense is playing better from what we saw early in the season, and their defense is still playing relatively good. It just so happens that something goes wrong every single week for this team, and it's got to be frustrating if you are a Bears fan. The good news for the Bears is that Caleb Williams is playing some good football, even if he's a tad bit inconsistent. When he's on, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. So that does have to be a good positive sign moving forward for this Bears team, because ultimately speaking, you were never going to win a championship this year. It's always been about building for the future and seeing what this team could be this year, and this is kind of what we're seeing from this team. Bit of inconsistent play, which is kind of to be expected. Ultimately, I do think the Bears are going to be a good team moving forward, especially, into next year in 2027, but for this year, you have to kind of go through those ups and downs to allow this team to develop and grow. Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington Commanders, one of the craziest games, arguably of the entire season. The Dallas Cowboys outplayed Washington for the majority of the game, and the defense for the Cowboys was playing fantastic football until everything that could have went crazy in that fourth quarter happened. It was just such a bizarre fourth quarter. To kind of summarize the game, I thought Cooper Rush played pretty well. They drove the ball effectively down the field, but Aubrey had a blocked field goal and a missed field goal that led to 0 points on, I think, the first first two opening drives where they moved the ball down the field pretty well. Then Dallas had a blocked punt that allowed even more points for Washington. Washington did not have a good offensive game until the late fourth quarter. They just could not move the ball down the field, and they couldn't score touchdowns, which has kind of been a continuous trend the entire season for Washington. For Dallas, again, I thought the offense was good in this game. They just couldn't capitalize on actually moving the ball down the field with legitimate points. You go into halftime with a 3-3 score, but you feel like if you're Dallas that you let a lot of opportunities go out the window. And the same thing could be said about Washington. They also had a couple opportunities to make some plays too. Third quarter, kind of both teams were just trading punches, and then the fourth quarter happened where just everything chaotic happened. Dallas scored several touchdowns. They had a kickoff return for a touchdown. They had a onside kick score for a touchdown. Washington basically on like a desperation play made a huge play with Terry McLaurin to get a touchdown, missed the game-tying field goal attempt or extra point attempt, and then the onside kick goes for a touchdown. I mean, just a crazy sequence of events that felt like this game was going to shift in favor of Washington until ultimately Dallas just somehow found a way to win. For Dallas, I kind of think this is a bad win in regards to this one because you should be tanking for a top 15-ish pick or top 10 or top 5 pick. But ultimately, if you're trying to go for Ashton Jeanty, I don't think you have to be too worried about a win like this. You're still going to likely end up with a top 10 pick and still are going to be in striking range for Jeanty. Whereas for Washington, I think it's pretty fair to say that Washington is sort of hitting a bit of a rookie wall right now with Jaden Daniels and with the team entirely. I don't even think Jaden played particularly bad today. He was making a lot of big-time plays. He actually led the team in passing and rushing yards on the day. But his play has kind of come down from what we saw earlier in the season, and I think that could be said for the entire team. This is not just a Jaden Daniels issue. This is a Washington issue. This team is still developing and still growing. For 7-5 in their first really big year with Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels is still impressive, but yeah, things are starting to kind of unravel a tad bit with this team. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. This might have been the best offensive showcase that we've seen from Miami in quite some time. Creative play calling, big plays down the field. Tua Tagovailoa was perfect on the day. 29 for 40, 317 and 4 touchdowns. Devon Achane got going a tad bit in this one, and even though Tyreek Hill wasn't a big-time playmaker in this one, Jalen Waddle was. This is the type of offensive performance you wanted to see from this Dolphins team basically the entire season, and we got to see it in this one, granted against one of the worst teams in the NFL in New England. For Drake May, this is a tough game. You're going up against an offense that is going crazy. You're going up against a good defense, and yeah, he kind of had a bit of a rough one. He had an interception. I think he also had a couple fumbles. I mean, just wasn't a great day for Drake May, but again, he's a rookie. I'm not too worried about him. For Miami, I think this is a good start to potentially making that push to make the playoffs. If they keep playing like this, they're likely going to win a lot more games, so we'll have to wait and see what they can actually do. They are 5-6, so we still have a lot of time to see what this team can actually become. Moving on to the Chiefs versus the Panthers, I'm just going to kind of talk about this one really quickly. I was really impressed with Bryce Young in this performance. For the Chiefs, I'm not impressed at all because you should be dominating this Panthers team, especially offensively speaking. But to allow Carolina with Bryce Young to score 27 and actually tie the game up late and actually force Mahomes to put together a game-winning drive is really bad for the Chiefs, but really positive for Carolina. For Bryce Young, look, you're fighting for your starting position in 2025 and 2026 and, years beyond, and he's doing the right things. This was arguably his best game of his entire career, going up against a legitimately good team. I'm not panicking on the Chiefs quite yet. I still think they're a great team that just is kind of going through the motions of the regular season, but they keep playing like this, especially against good opponents, they're going to lose more games. So they have to start to play better football. Whereas for Carolina, hey, keep doing this and you're going to find a way to win a lot of games. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the New York Giants. I'm just not going to talk too much about this one. Sorry, guys. The New York Giants are just a bad football team. Tommy DeVito should not be a starting quarterback. They have got to get Malik Neighbors and Tyron Tracy the ball way more than what they got in this game. Brian Daboll is on the hot seat, which is unfortunate because I do think he's a good coach, but he's also not doing himself any favors by starting Tommy DeVito. Whereas for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this was always kind of going to be a win for this team. They're just way more talented and have a way better offense than the New York Giants. Baker Mayfield was excellent on the day, in my opinion. No turnovers, made a couple of just huge throws, couple of just clutch plays. He had a fumble recovery that actually was massive. Bucky Irving was fantastic today, and getting Mike Evans back has got to be a good feeling for this team moving forward. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but if they can go on a bit of a stretch where they can win a bunch of games, this team could potentially find themselves back into the playoff conversation. Then we have the Detroit Lions versus the Indianapolis Colts. Again, I don't feel like I have to talk too much about this one because it kind of went exactly how I think we all thought it was going to go. Indianapolis, despite having a good valiant effort in like the first half, just ultimately just didn't have enough on the offensive end to match the Detroit Lions. For the Lions, it wasn't even their best performance of the season. They only scored 24 points, but it felt like they were just dominating the game from start to finish. Even when the Lions were down 3-0 in the first quarter, I just felt like eventually this Lions offense was going to get the run game going to get Jared Goff going, and yeah, they did so. Anthony Richardson continues to kind of show the highs and lows of what he can be. Last week he was awesome. This week he wasn't so awesome. He was 11 for 28 for 172 yards, did have 10 carries for 61 yards as well. That 11 for 28 is just a really bad mark, and it kind of feels like that's been a consistent theme with Anthony. When he plays bad, it's just because he's not completing a lot of receptions, and maybe that's because he's pushing the ball too much down the field and not taking checkdowns enough. I don't know, but it's something that he needs to work on. For the Lions, they're the best team in the NFL. I think it's pretty fair to say that. Jared Goff is playing at a very high level, and yeah, when you have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs going, this team is damn near impossible to beat. Then we begin our 3 o'clock window, beginning with the Denver Broncos versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Surprisingly, the Raiders actually held a halftime lead in this game. I kind of felt like Denver was going to come off to a better start and just kind of impose their will on this bad Raiders team, but it actually took them a little bit to actually get going. Bit of a slow start from Bo Nix and this offense, but they really got going in that second half. Unfortunately, Gardner Minshew did get injured in this game and is likely going to miss the rest of the season, so that is unfortunate for Las Vegas because they also have an injury to Aiden O'Connell, but it was already a lost year for them, so if anything, this actually helps them in their pursuit of the #1 overall pick. So if you're a Raiders fan, I don't think you're complaining. Travis Hunter could be a Raider by the end of the season, which would be awesome news for them. Or hell, if you do get the #1 pick, you could potentially trade it and get a ton of other assets. So yeah, good news for the Raiders. This is a good loss in my opinion. For Denver, definitely not their cleanest win, but a win is a win. You're 7-5 and you're looking like you're going to be a playoff team. And yeah, Bo Nix might be the offensive rookie of the year if these things sort of continue to happen, with Jaden Daniels struggling a bit more and Bo Nix playing like this guy. I mean, this is awesome. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals, I got to give my flowers to the Seattle Seahawks. It was a ugly game from a lot of different pieces. They couldn't get the run game going. Geno Smith had a bad interception and things weren't going their way, but their defense held a very, very good offense to only 6 points. And now, because of their most recent 2-week stretch here, they're #1 in their division just like that. From being in last place a couple weeks ago to now being in first place just because you beat the Niners and the Cardinals has got to be an awesome feeling if you are a Seahawks fan. It hasn't been a pretty season. It's been a lot of highs and lows for this team, but given the fact that the division is extremely open with the Rams not playing great football and the Niners really struggling and Arizona playing good football but just not having the talent, this is kind of the perfect storm for a team like Seattle to actually win the division this year. It's kind of been why I've been so hard on them the past couple weeks, because it's like this division is so open and Seattle has the talent, they're just not playing like it. And these past 2 weeks, they've started to play a bit more like the football team that we thought they could be, and now we're kind of seeing the result of it. For Arizona, this is just a really tough loss. They could not run the ball at all. Their leading rusher is Trey Benson with 18 yards. That's just really bad. Kyler Murray definitely did not have his best showcase that we've seen the past couple weeks. I mean, just like 2 weeks ago, he put on his best performance, and this week he did not have his best performance. That interception was just a really, really bad play that ultimately made Seattle win the game. This was by far Seattle's best defensive performance against a good offense. So shout out to Seattle. If they can build upon this and continue to grow their lead within the division, this could be an awesome season for Seattle to potentially win the division and make a deep playoff run, but we'll have to wait and see. Then our last 3 o'clock game was between the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers. I don't feel like I have to say too much about this one because the Packers were going up against a Niners team without like half of their stars. San Francisco, without Brock Purdy, without Nick Bosa, without a ton of different guys, is just not a good football team. They have the high level talent, but the supplementary players just aren't playing at a high enough level to even keep these type of games competitive. I thought Brandon Allen was fine given what he was thrown into. He's going up against an awesome Packers team, and yeah, he had an interception, he made a number of bad plays, but he's a backup quarterback, so to throw him into this game, I kind of felt like it was a bad decision. I kind of honestly felt like they should have started the other backup instead of Brandon Allen, but you started Brandon Allen, so yeah, you were supposed to lose. McCaffrey couldn't get things going because the Packers could just really not give a damn about what Brandon Allen was going to do. As long as they stuffed Christian McCaffrey, they were going to win this game, and that's kind of what they did. For the Packers, offensively speaking, no turnovers with Jordan Love today. Josh Jacobs with 106 yards for 3 touchdowns has got to be a good feeling, because Josh Jacobs has had a really good season, and if you feel like you can continue to rely on him to be that big playmaker, this offense could really change a bit of a dynamic of what they've usually been, because this Packers team is really known for their quarterback play. Jordan Love, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. But if you can get a guy like Josh Jacobs to really get going and rely on him to be the catalyst of your offense, that could really make this team even that much more scary. Jordan Love only threw the ball 23 times, only had 13 completions, but was very efficient with what he was doing, and honestly had a big play to Christian Watson that I think he dropped, which is unfortunate. So to rely on Josh Jacobs, especially against a team like San Francisco, is a good feeling. Moving forward, hopefully they can continue to build off of this and beat good teams. And then to end this video off, we're going to talk about the Sunday Night Football game. If you guys do want to know my opinion of the Monday Night Football game between the Ravens and the Chargers, I will have a post on my community tab, so check that out if you are interested in my opinion of that game. Moving on to the Sunday Night Football game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the LA Rams, I was expecting a bit more of a competitive matchup, but it really wasn't that, especially in the second half. LA came out of the gates looking like a really good, well-equipped offense that could potentially give this Eagles team a run for their money, and then things just kind of really fell apart in that second quarter. The offense scored 7 points in the first half, and just it kind of felt like they could have put up more points. The offense just wasn't really playing efficient football, which is weird because you look at the numbers and they're really not bad. Stafford with 243 yards, Kyren Williams with 72 yards, Puka Nacua with 117. The numbers don't look bad. It just wasn't their day. Let's just say it like that. Saquon Barkley had himself a career day. He was unstoppable the entire night. That Rams defense that has been playing better football lately just simply could not stop him. Jalen Hurts was efficient. They didn't turn the ball over, and I got to give credit to this Eagles team. I was very skeptical of Kellen Moore and if he was actually going to be able to consistently rely upon a guy like Saquon Barkley and rely on the legs of Jalen Hurts and not force Jalen Hurts to throw the ball 40-50 times like he was doing with Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert. And credit to him, he's actually found a way to win by running the football, which isn't a very hard thing to do when you have Hurts, Saquon, and a good offensive line, but you kind of get my gist, hopefully. I'm disappointed with the Rams. I really want to see them be a bit more competitive with this Eagles team. I think this Eagles team is maybe the best or second best team in the conference, and to see the Rams get destroyed in the second half was kind of bad. But real quick, I just want to update you guys on my predictions. These were my predictions that I made in my last predictions video. As you can see, record's looking pretty good. So if you guys enjoyed that, make sure you guys check out my next predictions video on Thursday. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe button. And I love you guys.